I had just returned home on Friday and was looking forward to the weekend. But my wife did not greet me as usual, without a smile and a kiss. She looked nervous and determined. Something was wrong. I greeted her and asked about the children, saying that it was Friday, it was time for them to be home. She said that the children stayed with their mother until Monday, and made an urgent appeal, saying that they needed to talk. She mentioned that there was something she needed to talk about, admitting that it might be difficult for me to understand. She assured me that this is not something negative, but it can be difficult to immediately perceive. She asked me to try to understand if I love her. I'd agreed to try to understand, and she thanked me, saying that it had been on her mind for a long time and might sound stupid or strange at first glance. Then she talked about her desire to be intimate with other people, and despite my initial chuckling, she conveyed the seriousness of her intention. I asked if she was going to divorce me, but she assured me of her love and that she would never leave me. She stressed that this is something she wants to do. Talking about my desire to explore something beyond our marriage, I felt anger replace my initial shock. I expressed my misunderstanding and disagreement with this decision. She insisted that she was going to do it, whether I liked it or not, clarifying that she had never cheated and was not going to do it. She assured me that she was going to take all precautions and would not refuse me anything. However, I was not fully present in the conversation, and she noticed that my thoughts had disappeared. She stressed that it had nothing to do with us and made it perfectly clear that this was a personal need that she needed to satisfy. Despite her pause, I remained motionless and unresponsive. I just sat there staring. It seemed like my brain was completely shutting down. My wife of 17 years had just ruined me and expected me to like it, or at least that I would bear it. I didn't need any of this, and I never will. Monica, my wife, expressed her need for this change, explaining that she had reached a certain stage in her life when she really needed it. She told me that she was a virgin when we got married and had never known another man. She emphasized her desire to explore and understand the physical side of love, clarifying that it concerns only the bodily and not the love aspect. With the exception of me, I remained silent, unable to say a word. The revelation that my wife wanted to explore other men, not one, but several, was deeply shocking. The most shocking thing was that she expected me to agree with that. Monica begged me to say something, but I couldn't find the words. Instead, I got up and moved to the upper floor to the bedroom that was ours. She meant nothing to me now. I felt sick and my soul was completely empty. I was overcome with fear. In a noticeably short time, maybe 15 minutes or even less, she managed to ruin our marriage. I sat down on the bed and thought, or rather tried to think. I knew I had to leave home and distance myself from my wife, a wife who was on the verge of betrayal and who didn't care about my feelings. I was an active participant in marathons at the university. Running or long walks have always helped me clarify my thoughts. I decided to go for a long walk. After changing out of the suit into comfortable jeans, a shirt, and my $120 sneakers, I grabbed my wallet, cap, and sunglasses and went down the stairs. Monica remained sitting in the same place where she had voiced her intention to explore intimacy with other men. I stopped for a moment, looking at her. She seemed like an outsider to me again. After taking a look at her, I put my hand on the door handle and left, slamming the door behind me. At first, her words were lost when I slammed the door shut. When she called me to come back and talk, I had already passed the neighbor's house. She caught up with me, ran next to me until she suffocated. She kept begging me, saying that we needed to talk and that she loved me. She assured me that she wasn't doing this to hurt me, and stressed that we were still together. She expressed her love and begged me to come back. In the end, she gave up. I think she collapsed on the sidewalk, but I didn't look back to check. It hurt me to look at her. She couldn't keep up with my pace. I could still run a marathon in 3 hours without too much effort. Soon I was 2 blocks ahead, and she was nowhere to be seen. Turning the corner, I accelerated to the maximum, which I call overload. I was walking at the speed of an airplane. I could keep up this pace indefinitely, and maybe I will. We met in college. She handed out plastic cups of water to the participants of the 10-kilometers race. I won this race. Later, I joked with her that I won the race because I was looking for her before she disappeared. I managed to catch her in time before she disappeared into the crowd of spectators. We got along instantly. She worked as a secretary to the dean of the business school. Despite the fact that she did not graduate from college, thanks to her scrupulous attention to detail and mastery of written communication, she got a serious job. At that time, I was a graduate student studying electronics and computer science. We dated for 6 months before getting intimate, and it was incredible. Even though she was a girl, she was exceptionally experienced in matters of intimacy, and she really liked it. I didn't think about it at the time, but she was naturally enthusiastic. There were signs. She just never fully realized it. We got married a few months after my graduation and 14 months after our first meeting. I was 26 and Ronnie was a year older, 27. Yes, I'll repeat it. She was a virgin at the age of 27. Callie and Tom Jr. were born in the 9th and 10th years of our marriage, respectively, and we had a good life. Ronnie continued to work as the dean's secretary, and I worked as a systems engineer for Peters Limited, a company engaged in advanced military research and development. My boss and the owner of Peters Limited, Paul Schuler, who tended to workaholism, was a good friend, not just a boss. Monica and I had had a wonderful marriage for about 17 years, I thought. However, Monica was clearly not satisfied with something. In the last few months, she has become distant, sometimes irritable with me and, less often, with the children. This led to several fierce disputes. If the shortness with her could still be endured, then, when it came to children, I couldn't stand it. I thought it might be menopause. I was not knowledgeable about female biology, but I knew some things. I intended to study this topic in more detail, but I never found the time. Now that I was walking, I wished I had done it. Monica explained to Barbara that she didn't know where her brother Bobby was. She mentioned that he left the house around 5 p.m. on Friday and hasn't been back since. After expressing her concern and state of panic, Monica turned to Barbara for help and advice regarding Bobby's whereabouts. Barbara Mason could have been my wife's double, and they were mistaken for sisters several times. Both had red hair, sinuous figures, and cute freckles. Barbara may have been an inch taller than Ronnie with her 170 centimeters, but otherwise they were almost identical. However, Bobby had a different personality. She was determined, slow to speak, and less inclined to speak, still single at 40. No, she wasn't gay, but she preferred to be independent. Barbara Mason asked about Tom, expressing surprise that he could behave like this. Monica said that they had a disagreement, and Tom left without saying a word. Their scolding and the fact that Tom left without saying anything alerted Bobby, and she assured Monica that her husband would find Tom. However, Bobby wanted to know the details of their argument, to which Monica replied vaguely, saying that it was personal and nothing that could make Tom leave. Barbara, a psychologist, commented on the situation and expressed her intention to find out more when they find Tom. She noticed that Monica had waited too long to call, hinting at sarcasm. Despite their good relationship, Barbara always thought Monica was a bit silly. Barbara then asked for details about Tom's departure, including the direction he went, his clothes, and whether he took a coat or a car. Monica told the information that Tom went east towards Baxter, was wearing a dark green t-shirt, jeans, and a cap with the symbols of cubes. She mentioned that he hadn't brought a coat or a car, expressing concern about the frosty weather. Barbara confirmed the urgency of the situation and instructed Monica to stay at home and keep an eye on the phone in case Tom called. She assured Monica that she had a mobile phone and would keep her informed as she went to look for Tom. The road was snowy, so Barbara Mason was driving at a speed below the limit. 10 miles out of town, her cell phone rang, forcing her to stop to answer. She found out that Tom was in Baxter and, expressing concern, decided to go there immediately before hanging up. In Baxter, a town of 150 residents, Tom treated the place indifferently, enjoying a hot meal and warmth in his cell. The steel door at the end of the corridor slammed shut, and although Tom couldn't see who was coming, the sound of footsteps indicated that someone was approaching. Being the sole prisoner, it had to be him. As soon as he arrived, Barbara interrogated Tom, questioning his pride. He asked if Monica had called her, and Barbara confirmed, disclosing that she had already hit the road in search of him. She voiced her concerns about his actions, emphasizing the presence of their young ones and an anxious wife at home. Tom sarcastically remarked that the kids might be concerned, but Monica wouldn't be. Agreeing that Monica hadn't provided much detail, only mentioning a disagreement, Barbara acknowledged Tom's explanation, revealing Monica's intention to engage in extramarital affairs. Stoic Barbara listened as Tom elaborated on Monica's plans. Sympathetic guards opened Tom's cell, and they proceeded towards the front receiving area. Tom was informed about his bail but reminded to return by Friday to plead. The jailer advised him to pay the fine and settle the damages caused during the bar fight. Showing comprehension, Tom agreed with the advice. During the long drive back, Barbara inquired about the bar fight, prompting Tom to share his story. After a brief silence, she began analyzing the situation. As a sister, Barbara considered herself as patient and insisted on helping him. She noted that women undergo changes men can't comprehend due to hormonal factors, inducing fear and insecurity. I reassured Bobby that I wasn't naive, emphasizing that not all women engage with other men to improve their circumstances. Speaking confidently, I'd asserted my position. Bobby countered with a statistic stating that both men and women engage in extramarital affairs, contributing to the high divorce rate. She suggested that Monica might be going through a similar phase and needing my support. Before I could respond, she raised her hands to stop me. Clarifying her stance, she advocated for conversations, holding hands, and guiding Monica through this challenging period. Bobby stressed the importance of my strength and support for Monica. While expressing my willingness to help, I set a clear condition. If she allowed another man to engage with her, our relationship would be over, without exceptions. I made it explicit that if she disrespected me in such a manner, I would ensure appropriate consequences for both her and her lovers. Bobby fell silent once more, and I felt uneasy, wrongly perceiving her thoughtfulness as judgment. The conversation then shifted to lighter topics. Acknowledging my accomplishment of walking 100 miles in 2 days, Bobby commended me. Downplaying it, I dismissed it as insignificant, claiming I needed the time for introspection. Achieving this feat in challenging conditions and temperatures during this time of year was quite remarkable. "What were you thinking?" she asked. While referring to the weather and road conditions, I'd extrapolated her words to encompass my thoughts about Monica, myself, and our marriage. With Christmas approaching, I wondered what awaited me under the yet-to-be decorated tree. Perhaps evidence of infidelity, carrying someone else's seed. Consumed by anger, I couldn't bring myself to go home just yet. Instead, I instructed Bobby to drop me off at Peter's, explaining that I needed solitude on this Sunday afternoon. I suggested that she could visit Monica and inform her about my need for space. Bobby understood and mentioned that Monica was genuinely worried about me. She speculated that Monica might reconsider her plans upon learning of my feelings. Reassuring Bobby that I wouldn't act rashly, I assured her that I just needed more time to think. After watching Barbara drive away, I entered my office. Despite her belief that Monica might postpone her plans, I couldn't shake the concern that she might have already followed through with them. Reflecting on the loss of trust in my wife, I regarded it as a significant and troubling situation. "He's afraid he's lost you," Barbara commented, entering without a greeting and shedding off her coat. Monica dismissed the notion, proclaiming that she had assured me of her unwavering loyalty. Barbara challenged her, asserting that any man in my position would be thinking what I was thinking upon hearing about Monica's desire to explore. Troubled, Monica asked if I had confided in Barbara. Barbara confirmed, citing our strong sibling bond and highlighting the futility of keeping secrets like that for long. Monica defended her desire to explore, viewing it as a curiosity she had long harbored, deeming it acceptable to act upon. Barbara issued a stern warning, cautioning Monica of the dire consequences that awaited her as she proceeded with her plan. She stressed the gravity of the situation, questioning whether Monica truly understood the ramifications. As Monica explained her desperate need, she couldn't bring herself to meet Barbara's gaze, hoping beyond hope that Barbara would grasp the depth of her turmoil. It had consumed her for far too long, leaving her feeling helpless and uncertain of her own ability to resist. Monica emphasized that only Tom had ever truly understood her, and she needed him to do so again. She acknowledged her inability to live without him, but was unsure if she could resist the temptation of pursuing her desires with someone else. Admitting to the looming danger of outright betrayal, Monica confessed that her overpowering feelings made it incredibly challenging to resist. In response, Barbara shared her own perspective, revealing that she too had experienced overwhelming desires. Despite loving men and not being gay herself, she chose not to marry because she recognized her inability to remain faithful to one person. Barbara cautioned Monica about the potential consequences of her proposal, emphasizing the risk of losing everything if she didn't address her actions soon. Realizing the truth in Barbara's words, Monica began to sob, finding comfort in Barbara's assurance that everything would be all right. Barbara offered to stay with Monica for the night, promising to be there the next day when Tom returned, ready to mediate the situation. Expressing gratitude for Monica's acknowledgement, Barbara advised her to abandon the idea of being with other men and stressed the importance of convincing her husband that he had nothing to fear. Monica nodded, allowing herself a small smile, though Barbara failed to notice the subtle narrowing of her eyes in response to her last words. As Monica faced the reality that obtaining her husband's approval was an unrealistic goal, she found herself at a crossroads. She had two distinct choices before her: either abandon her plans entirely or find a way to persuade her husband to see things differently. Ultimately, her priority was winning him back, as her love for him remained undeniably true. For the first time since his abrupt departure, Monica felt a sense of clarity. She knew that the answers she sought were within reach, and she would soon discover her fate. The next morning, I awoke on the office couch, feeling somewhat stiff. The lengthy walk and less than ideal sleeping conditions had taken a toll on me. While I was accustomed to marathon distances for work, military-style endurance walks were a rarity for me in recent years. Yet I couldn't help feeling a sense of pride that my skills hadn't completely diminished. Not yet, at least. I parked my car in front of the house a little after 10 a.m., knowing that Callie and Tom Jr. would be at school. Monica opened the door, embracing me tightly. The relief in her eyes at my return was palpable. She assured me that she was no longer worried and asked me to forget everything she had said earlier. She admitted to being foolish and mentioned having a conversation with Bobby would help her gain a new perspective. Although I remained cautious, still harboring suspicions, I couldn't deny the change in her demeanor. She seemed to have let go of something that she had adamantly refused to discuss just a few days ago. I acknowledged her statement with a guarded response, hoping that she truly meant it. Upon entering the kitchen, I noticed Bobby sitting at the table, sipping her tea. I greeted her and couldn't help but wonder if she was there to support Monica's story. Bobby confirmed that they had spoken extensively and expressed hope that we could overcome this challenging situation, describing it as a near episode of female confusion. Despite her reassurances, something still felt off to me. I found myself trapped in a predicament, lacking trust in my own wife. I nodded, hesitant to take anything for granted, even with Bobby's insights. After all, she hadn't witnessed or heard Monica's desperate pleas like I had during our confrontation last Friday. Over the next few days, Monica worked tirelessly to reassure me. Slowly, I began to believe Bobby's explanation of a momentary lapse in judgment. Hope sparked within me as I thought that we might be able to move past this. However, everything changed on a peculiar Thursday, when I received a suspicious phone call with background noises in the call. I didn't mention it to Monica, but I couldn't shake off the words I managed to decipher. Call, cell, call, my cell. Following my instincts, I went upstairs and found her cell phone on the dresser. I checked the call history and discovered 6 unknown numbers. I felt both lucky and equipped, knowing that my military background would allow me to uncover the identities behind those numbers easily, even if it meant crossing legal boundaries. My boss had done it before, and now it was my turn. After all, this wasn't a no-fault state. If I had concrete evidence of her infidelity, she would be mine. With a newfound confidence that night, our lovemaking was more than passionate. Monica had undoubtedly turned things around in the past 6 days, and I hoped that I wouldn't have to give up this renewed connection anytime soon. Arriving early at the lab, I aimed to catch Tim before he left for field work. Tim, our systems installer and field technician, shared a strong bond with me, fueled by our shared love for our alma mater, Ohio State, and countless nights filled with cheers and beers. I spotted Tim walking by and called out, asking if he had a moment. He paused and agreed to come into my office when I explained that I had a problem and needed his assistance. Tim settled into a chair in my office, and I took a seat beside him. I brought up the incident from last year when Mr. Peters had asked him to investigate. Tim's attention was suddenly piqued, and he expressed concern about my involvement in a similar situation. I reassured him that I had valid reasons to be worried and asked if he could help me. Tim agreed to assist but warned me about the risks, stressing that I should be absolutely sure. I nodded and assured him that if I had any new information, I would contact him discreetly. He agreed and suggested that I conduct some discreet investigations over the next month, then report back to him. I handed him a list of phone numbers I had found in my wife's phone, admitting that I didn't recognize them and that they might be insignificant, but there was a possibility they were significant. Tim acknowledged that it was a good starting point and clarified that it wouldn't be illegal if my name was associated with the account, which I confirmed. Reflecting on my wife's actions, I realized that she had underestimated my technological proficiency and connections in the field. If she intended to cheat, her chances of avoiding detection were slim unless she could completely alleviate my suspicions. It seemed like a risky strategy, but perhaps it was her only option. Life at home appeared normal with happy children, a cheerful Monica, while I pretended to be content. A week later, Tim requested a meeting at our usual spot. He revealed that he had investigated the phone numbers, obtained addresses, and caught Monica visiting 2 of them on consecutive days. He shared photographic, video, and audio evidence with me. It was clear that my wife was indeed cheating on me. Nonchalantly, I asked for more evidence, particularly additional videos, as I had plans to expose her together with her lovers. Tim expressed concerns, suggesting that Monica might be setting a trap of some sort. However, I assured him that I didn't intend to use the gathered evidence in court and had another purpose in mind. Intrigued by the espionage aspect, Tim agreed to gather more evidence. After 3 weeks of Tim's thorough investigations, armed with extensive information about the individuals involved, I marveled at the depth of his work. Now it was a matter of choosing the right time and approach. I needed to speak with Bobby, and together we watched the collected evidence in her office. My sister expressed disbelief and frustration, admitting that Monica had even deceived her. Reflecting on the situation, I shared my frustration about feeling deceived and occasionally being treated as a second choice. Bobby advised against seeking revenge, emphasizing that it would only consume me in the aftermath and eventually affect our children's opinions of both of us. Despite the mental torment, I acknowledged her wisdom and decided that overt revenge against Monica was not the right course of action. However, I contemplated retaliating against her lovers, believing that if executed properly, it would make her incredibly unpopular in no time. As it turned out, she had 5 lovers, not 6. The additional number I had obtained was a misdeal to her phone. 4 of her liaisons were married individuals, all with underage children. 2 were individuals whose careers would be significantly jeopardized with minimal effort, a state politician and a priest. Monica had dug herself into a deep pit. The influence of her desire for intimacy had undeniably corrupted her. Suddenly, my sister's decision to remain single made perfect sense. Monica would have been better off doing the same. My primary concern was for the children of the cheaters, including my own. My kids would stay with me. There would be no negotiation. Well, Monica would be allowed open-ended visitation. Her lovers would not be permitted near them. Otherwise, I would grant her the house, but claim everything else, relocating myself and the children to a lovely 3-bedroom condo near their new school. It was time for war. With the help of a tech-savvy friend, we blurred Monica's face in 5 incriminating videos and created copies for the wives and partners of the 5 individuals. 2 additional copies were sent to a carefully chosen TV station to expose the priest. I contemplated suing the offenders, but that would have left Monica vulnerable in court, and I needed to protect her to some extent for the sake of my children. I was partially heeding Bobby's advice. The thought crossed my mind that technology might one day put an end to extramarital affairs. It was becoming too easy to expose these individuals. On the designated day, I arrived early at work, staring at my computer, which was set up and ready. With a double click, 4 husbands would likely become ex-husbands, while another would find solace in a remote monastery. I double-clicked. Hell was about to break loose. I couldn't contain my smile as I felt a surge of anticipation akin to Joshua to the walls of Jericho, as I knew everything was about to change. With a casual nod to my section boss, I informed him of my decision to take the rest of the day off and headed back to the comfort of my home. Thoughts about Monica flooded my mind, wondering if and when she would receive the news I was about to deliver. Seeking solace in uncertainty, I loaded a video to the player, ready to witness the crumbling of our marriage through provocative film clips. Craving a moment of respite, I descended the stairs to take a nap, only to be interrupted by a sudden spark of inspiration. Hastily, I returned to the phone, grabbed a notepad, and penned a note that held immense power. Play the video. One swift push of a button, and everything would be unveiled. An hour passed, and I heard the familiar sound of her car entering the garage. My heart raced as I positioned myself at the top of the staircase, eager to catch a glimpse of her reaction. She stood in front of the TV, reading the note attached to the tape, and curiosity got the best of her. She pressed play. Watching from the shadows, I could sense her unease growing with each passing second. Although I couldn't see the video myself, it didn't take long for her to faint. The video continued to play, undeterred by her sudden collapse. Carefully, I made my way down and switched off the machine, waiting patiently for her to regain consciousness. After what seemed like an eternity, her eyes spluttered open, and I positioned myself on the couch, ready to address the aftermath of our crumbling world. She spotted me, still groggy from her fall, and timidly asked if I hated her. Without hesitation, I had affirmed her fears, making it clear that reconciliation was out of the question. I offered her the house and custody of our children, asserting my ownership of everything else: stocks, bonds, savings. A glimmer of hope remained, where she could salvage a shred of self-respect if she didn't resist my plans. However, I warned her of the consequences should she choose to fight against me, knowing well that it would be her downfall. As Monica expressed remorse, explaining her compulsion for certain actions, I couldn't bring myself to forgive her. Her actions were unforgivable, and I made sure she understood that her consequences had finally caught up with her. The destruction had begun, and I'd advised her to avoid answering her phone anytime soon, for her presence would no longer be welcome in our children's lives. I made it clear that I had already secured a new place to live where Bobby would take the children after school. Although visitation rights were granted, I set the boundaries firmly. No male friends allowed. She nodded, acknowledging the severity of her mistakes. To her credit, Monica refrained from shedding tears or making excuses. I knew they would come, though, a mere 2 minutes after I left. With a heavy heart, but an unwavering determination, I bid her farewell, leaving behind a trail of divorce and despair. Even the priest had been reassigned, a mere footnote in the unraveling of lives. Monica still worked for the dean and saw the children frequently. It was a delicate task to help our little ones understand why their mother no longer resided with us. Yet somehow we managed to endure through the storm. Occasionally, Monica went on dates, perhaps set up by friends from the office, but the allure of promiscuity held no appeal for her anymore. Come Christmas, she would be with us, reminding us that she was still family. Yet she acknowledged her grave misjudgments and had the decency not to push her luck with me. Love, once so powerfully destructive, had left its mark. This is the second chapter of my story, a story that began 4 years ago when I married my wife. Our journey started with 2 years of courtship, building the foundations of love and trust. While our marriage was relatively young, there were no indications of trouble on the horizon. Our connection felt unbreakable, genuine. Alas, it was on the 4th of July during a party organized by her friend that the curtain was pulled back, revealing my wife's infidelity. But before I dive into the incident itself, let me provide some context. Approximately a week before that fateful day, my wife had mentioned her friend's July 4th celebration. Typically, we had a reliable babysitter for our 3-year-old, and we would inform the sitter well in advance of our needs for this particular event. However, my wife informed me that she had already contacted the babysitter, only to discover that her schedule was packed and she would be unable to assist us. Disappointment washed over me because our moments together had become increasingly scarce since the arrival of our child. Despite my reservations about her friend, who was still single and several years younger, carefree in her demeanor, I chose not to come across as controlling. Instead, I advised my wife to be cautious, as her friend may not always be the best influence. Thus, on the morning of July 4th, I took a distinct step out of the ordinary. I decided to contact the babysitter myself. Normally, my wife handled these arrangements, but I had to search for the sitter's number on her phone. In desperation, I even considered offering a higher hourly rate to sway her decision. If everything worked out as planned, I wanted to surprise my wife with the news that we could attend the event together, relishing in the joy of creating a last-minute miracle. It all began to unravel when I phoned the babysitter and asked her to reconsider looking after my son that evening. Even though she had initially declined, her surprise at my use of the word reconsider caught me off guard. She claimed it was the first time I had asked her about that date, contradicting my wife's previous conversation with her. Confused and concerned, I had improvised and told her that my wife had actually contacted a family member instead. It became apparent that my wife had lied for some unknown reason, causing alarm bells to ring in my mind. In order to keep my plan a secret, I'd arranged for the sitter to come to our house at 10 p.m., while my wife was scheduled to leave at 8 p.m. for an event. Before ending the call, I made sure the sitter understood not to inform my wife of her visit. I stumbled over my words when she reminded me of my wife's earlier attempt to secure the date and time, but I managed to cover it up by suggesting we thought the date night had been canceled. As planned, my wife left at 8 p.m., unaware of the surprise awaiting her. The sitter arrived promptly, and I headed to the party my wife had mentioned. I had a suspicion that she might not show up or go elsewhere, but to my surprise, she was indeed there. Her friend greeted me, and upon seeing me, my wife's reaction was one of utter disbelief and shock. It had only been a few hours since she left home, but she seemed intoxicated, with bloodshot eyes and a frosty reception towards me. She repeatedly questioned why I was there and who was taking care of our child. Assuring her that the babysitter situation was under control, I tried to calm her down. I wanted us to enjoy the evening together, watching the fireworks display. The party had a noticeable gender imbalance, with more guys than girls. The event seemed centered around a game night, particularly focused on truth or dare games. As my wife grew increasingly agitated, she expressed her desire to leave and go home, raising red flags in my mind. Saying we could head home, I asked for a moment to try some drinks since I had just arrived. In the kitchen, I struck up a conversation with a random guy pretending to be interested in one of the girls at the party. I discreetly pointed out my wife without revealing her identity and asked for his opinion. He warned me that she was off limits as she arrived with a guy who was known to be a friend of his. Curiosity piqued. I pressed for more details about this guy, learning that my wife had been involved with him since they met at a concert. This revelation hit me hard since I had also been present at that concert. I remembered her brief absence to get snacks, which had seemed suspiciously long at the time. This incident occurred about a month ago, and since then, my wife has been frequently leaving the house, even going on a trip out of town. This new revelation left me questioning everything, unsure of the truth behind my wife's actions. The stranger arrogantly boasted about my wife as if she were a trophy he had won for his friend. He continued to blabber, divulging more details about their supposed rendezvous. He explained that he had attended the party to pursue my wife's acquaintance, describing her as a carefree spirit. Unsure if my reaction was apparent, I could no longer feign indifference. Just then, my wife's friend joined the conversation, seemingly aware that my inquiries were leading to the truth behind my wife's infidelity. However, it was too late. I could sense her involvement in this deceitful charade. Politely excusing myself, I questioned my wife's friend about my wife's whereabouts. She suggested checking the patio, and that's where I discovered my wife engrossed in a conversation with the man. Their interaction appeared to be either a heated debate or her attempt to convince him of something. Approaching them, I introduced myself to the man who had engaged in an improper relationship with my wife. But before I could utter a word to him, my wife quickly jerked me away, insisting that we should leave the party. Enraged, I swatted her hand away and expressed my desire to confront the man. Persuaded by my anger, she finally gave in and agreed to stay while I proceeded with my intent. Confronting him directly, I introduced myself as her husband and straightforwardly inquired if he had been aware of her marital status before becoming involved with her. With my formidable presence and the truth already uncovered, I intended to unnerve him and ensure my wife understood the gravity of her infidelity. I reiterated my question, clarifying my intentions were not to instigate a brawl and disrupt the party, but rather to determine his knowledge of her marital commitment. My wife grew increasingly anxious, attempting to restrain me while apologizing profusely. The man, cornered on the patio without any support, fell victim to my semblance and the bottle I held in my hand. He apologized, emphasizing his ignorance of causing trouble and claiming he had unknowingly approached my wife. Curiosity compelled me to ascertain the frequency of their encounters, to which he reluctantly responded. Wishing him a good night, I walked away. Climbing into my car, I drove back home with a heavy heart. There I informed my wife of my firm decision to pursue a divorce. Seeking solace and clarity, I checked into a hotel where I penned down my emotional turmoil, using writing as a form of self-therapy. I feel utterly lost, bewildered about the steps to take. Divorce is uncharted territory for me, and I am completely unfamiliar with the concept of co-parenting, having not grown up in such an environment. What I am certain of, though, is my inability to bear the sight of that woman. This heartbreaking incident leaves me physically ill.